All right, welcome everyone to the November 4th Arborist call. Call is being recorded and we'll have it up on our YouTube channel probably within a day or two, usually pretty quick turnaround. Agenda, welcome and meeting intro, research and implementation status updates from ZBRD and Zcashd. Big announcement on ZBRD, I know, but I'll leave it to that section. And then discussions, what's kind of dominated the Arborist calls over the last few months has been in U5, kind of that status. So we'll go over, status. We always talk about timeline as well, just for any small changes or anything. And then, yeah, just kind of have a wrap up. I'd encourage people to just ask questions throughout or, comment throughout. We try to keep these pretty free form and open. Arborist calls, for those that might not know, are where we talk about protocol development. And that could be what's under development, R&D efforts, designs, new protocol features, and then anything that might be a blocker or an unresolved issue that we need to follow up on either async or in the next Arborist call. The purpose is to make protocol development more accessible to a wider range of participants and to provide just transparency into protocol development for the community at large. Anyone can participate. If you're interested in learning about protocol development and the current state of things, hop in and register. If there's something you'd like to present or there's a topic you'd like discussed at a future Arborist call, you can just let me know at the email address there, steven@electriccoin.co, and we will get you slotted in. So with that, I will turn it over to the ZBRD team. I will stop sharing and take it away.
So Zebra had a big achievement in the past week. We tagged our first beta release, which means nice. That we think Zebra is stable enough to start using on testnet and mainnet. As part of that, we got the mempool working. We got partial validation of the NU5 consensus rules. And we closed off some security issues that we'd be concerned about. So things like open connection limits and connection rate limits, so that Zebra wouldn't just go and connect to every node in the network all the time. Because in my experience with Tor, that did happen if you didn't keep an eye on things up front. So yeah, those are the major features in that release. We've got good feedback already from about 5 people who have installed the beta release and have given us feedback about some issues they saw on Macs and in various other environments. And so we've updated our README and our documentation to include those. Since the beta release, we did a big upgrade to Tokyo, I think 1.13, all the way from 0.3.7, because we just hit pause on that until we had most of NU5 done. So that was a big achievement, and credit to particularly Janito for pulling that off. And we've started removing duplicate dependencies. Now that our biggest dependency tree is up to date, we can start knocking them off and hopefully speeding up compilation time and decreasing the size of the Zebra binary. So those are the things we have been working on over the past week or two.
Very good. Congratulations. A lot of congratulations in the chat, but yeah, huge congratulations. Great work.
Thanks. So just talking about some of the things we'd like to do in the next week or two, we wanted to get started on implementing the lock time consensus rules. So we might need some spec clarifications for that. And we're really keen to test Orchard transactions on testnet. So if you could let us know when you expect them to appear, so that we know if Zebra starts behaving funny, that's why. And I think we're also up for choosing the NU5 activation height for mainnet sometime over the next few weeks. Yeah. So those are the things from a technical perspective we're keen on looking at over the next few weeks.
Okay. Very good. All right. Okay. I will thank you for that. I'll go back to get my screen up again. On the Zcashd side, obviously the bulk of our focus is on NU5 support in one form or the other. So we'll just kind of hop into that discussion. We're obviously kind of it's been a long upgrade, and we're in the, kind of final stages of that. Still a good bit of work to do to ensure we have a successful activation, but we're past the audit phase. As we mentioned, a couple Arborist calls back, the audits wrapped up from both NCC and CADIT. Those reports are published. We put out a blog post with the results. They're both linked out of, a blog post summarizing the fact that the reports are done and published, and there's links in the blog posts to both those reports if anyone would like to have a look at those. I would say that both NCC and CADIT did, in our opinion, a really thorough job. Oh, I see someone's already dropped the links in there. Thank you, Deirdre. They did a really thorough job. We spent more time in the audit than, some of prior network upgrades, just because it was, new cryptography and the size of the upgrade is so large. But nonetheless, we've been pretty happy with the detail they went into and the work that they did. So, in some cases, some of the drawings in the audit reports of how things lay out are pretty informative, actually. So they did an excellent job. So there's some just general resources. Even if you're not into like audit specifics, there's some really cool diagrams and things like that in there. They kind of show how the components relate to each other. So were there any questions about the audit reports anyone has at the moment or anything? I know that some of the foundation engineers been looking over it, of course, but I didn't know if there was anything specific or any comments or questions anyone had before we move on those.
Kind of reviewing a little bit of discussion that we did on the ZIP call yesterday, because we didn't have a lot of ZIP stuff to talk about. We just started talking about the audits. I think it was just, they're all like minor things, because we depend on the pasta curves implementation. There was just a note that an internal representation of the Jacobian identity was like inconsistent with like how one generically represents the identity in Jacobian extended coordinates or projective coordinates, whatever you call them. But we basically talked that there are checks in the implementation to check for that, and that it's not intended to be exposed, and it is not exposed in any of the actual implementation. So it's kind of like an internal representation that kind of got leaked a little bit.
Right.
So that's just a minor thing. And then there was something else. Oh, we did a little discussion about how the auditors pointed out that for unified addresses, the priority order is not enforced by consensus nodes. And it's kind of like you can't do that because all of the pools of transparent, sapling, orchard funds do not really know about each other. And so having a way to ensure that if you have a unified address, that you use orchard first, and if there's no orchard, then sapling, and if there's no sapling, then transparent, basically makes these consensus nodes know about the interplay of these shielded pools. But it was an interesting thing to talk about coming out of that audit, because it's sort of like there are some things that would be nice to enforce at that level, but then you have to kind of make some fundamental changes in how you would enforce that in a full node, and things kind of start bleeding together.
You start stitching together the protocol layers in a way that then makes it harder to unstitch them when you want to deprecate a protocol.
Yeah, especially that last part. So TLDR, even though the auditors noted that kind of aspect of the proposed unified addresses, it's sort of like that's kind of how it goes, and it'll be enforced in correct software, rather than as a consensus rule that full validators can check. So that was an interesting discussion.
Mhm.
And then kind of just related to that, we were discussing Strad's kind of third iteration on deriving keys, incoming viewing keys for change and not change for Orchard, that apparently is back portable to Sapling, which is really exciting, to unify the behavior of all the keys in a unified address, as opposed to having Sapling be an outlier. But that did not come out of the audit. We just talked about it yesterday. And
Right.
looking forward to seeing it written up. I don't know if Tior has anything to add on that. We looked over the NCC audit as well. There was not a lot out of there either. Yeah, a lot of just kind of those little thingies in the Kedit audit. If anyone hasn't looked at the Kedit audit and wants to understand how the action circuit for Orchard, like what it's doing inside the circuit, they have an excellent diagram of literally where the data flows are happening and what it's checking inside the circuit. I really recommend checking out the Kedit audit if you are kind of a visual processor of information. Like I am. Excellent diagrams, including an excellent diagram about how all the keys are derived for Orchard that augments the key derivation diagram in the Zcash spec. Lots of great stuff in there. Very pleased with the output of that audit.
Right.
Diagram's not quite as pretty as the ones Dodger makes, but
All right.
I did look at them and go, oh, those are kind of familiar.
Yeah.
But it's a logical way to
Mhm.
kind of represent these sort of things. So yeah. But yeah, it's kind of it was kind of a flashback scene.
Yep.
Oh, one thing I forgot that we talked about, there was a note from the auditors about basically handling random number generation if you have a node or a wallet that's coming back from a suspended state, like a VM coming back. And like TLDR is kind of out of scope for the node implementation or the wallet implementation itself. It's kind of relying on your OS or your VM hypervisor or whatever to handle that correctly. But we also discussed like defense in depth mitigations for when you are sourcing randomness and you are trying as much as you can as an application within that environment to ensure that you are always forcing your underlying random number generator syscall to give you the latest. I think Tior wrote up some of those in a ticket in the Zebra repository if anyone's interested. But that's kind of where that was in these audits, and that's kind of where we're kind of both coming at from that, which is trying as much as possible to get close to the OS syscall to get randomness whenever we need it. And that's kind of the best you can do, and trying to like force that sourcing every time in case you are in that scenario, you're coming back from a suspended state.
Very good. Yeah, before I move on, just one more note on the audits. Kedit kind of primarily focused on the new cryptography. That was kind of their focus, which is, arguably the Orchard circuit, ZIP 224, those kind of things. And then NCC kind of focused on a lot of the other zips that are being implemented in EU5, which we'll look at the list in just a moment. But we kind of had, obviously there was some overlap, on some of the items, but that was kind of the primary area of focus for the two companies. We don't kind of publicly the audit reports speak for themselves. So we don't necessarily, provide an interpretation of the results other than to say, in this case, neither company found any serious or critical issues. So we're pleased with that and the thoroughness of their efforts. Okay, moving on. Yeah, so these are, again, this is nothing new for anyone on this call perhaps, but in the event someone is watching this recorded and didn't catch any lead up to NU5, these are the new NU5 zips that we have, and these are the zips that were updated to deal with Orchard, like zip 209 prohibit negative pool balances, those kind of things, just to include what it needed to about Orchard to be complete. We've got that. The timeline is kind of the one we had. Yeah, Taylor.
So I think we're missing zip 155 off that list, which is the address v2 network protocol format, unless that's somehow, it's kind of tricky because it's included in NU5 mainnet activation.
Zip 155.
Yeah, zip 1155. It's the address version 2 network message format.
Okay. Did we update that, Strad?
No, that's the that one's actually that was put up recently. That's to do with the Tor v3 and ITP kind of support the Adder v2 underlying stuff, which yeah, it's not technically any part of NU5. I'm guessing you're just meaning that it's at the moment it's being proposed to be deployed signaled by the same peer protocol version as signaling NU5 on mainnet, which would, so yeah, that's not part of NU5 though. That is just, if we're deploying it at that point, we would coordinate to pick the same one, so it's just convenient. But we could alternatively just like deploy with another version number, just as long as it's clear that there is a protocol version that corresponds to support for that version message.
Sure. So I think there was a bit of confusion, and maybe we could talk about this in the retrospective about how we kind of accept zips that are not in the network upgrade, but still happening at the same time as the network upgrade.
Yeah. It would also be nice to try and, because that's something that, because we have other ones that I've wanted to get out that that also would result in protocol version bumps. That we'd previously discussed as putting on hold until after NU5. And you could argue that this would also fall into that same bucket.
Mm-hmm.
But the core problem there, of course, is that the changes in a network upgrade are visible at a protocol level, and the protocol version number is a single line. So there isn't a good way inherently to just sort of like do that with single version bumping. So might be worthwhile thinking about maybe like turning that number from a single incremented version into maybe some kind of like, not necessarily a bit field, but like give, maybe have like when we bump a NU version, like give it a different range of bits that we increment or something to give us some space to be able to do like other protocol versions in between things.
All right,
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, covered that list. Timeline is what we went over last. We're working toward, we call it mainnet support release, essentially, as Taylor was mentioning earlier, the release that sets mainnet activation height. We're hoping to do that in November. That's our goal. We just kind of had a placeholder roughly mid-November. We want to get some additional, kind of wallet infrastructure in place and Orchard transaction capabilities in place before cutting that. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Any questions about this? And that's the last slide. Yeah. Let me just get out of that. I'll stop sharing. Yeah. So that was my last kind of prepared slide on NU5, just to give everyone an update. So any questions, NU5 related at all, Orchard related at all, audit or anything anyone wants to kind of go over?
So it would be good to just sort of plan out or just like, sketch out in the head what the mainnet activation stage is going to look like. In particular, as far as like reifying and codifying the circuit, because we're currently looking at as we discussed in prior calls, and as you'll have noted from the Kedded audit, there were some of the comments there were to do with like there are things that need cleanup, there are things that could be done cleaner, and so there are changes to that effect that we're wanting to bring in, that some of which would result in concrete circuit changes. So we actually had a discussion about this yesterday or the day before, I think, in core team, just as far as like dependency management goes, because we'd like to keep the main branch of the Orchard repo still compatible with what's currently deployed on testnet. So for the interim, the plan is to any changes that would result in a change to the circuit, i.e. a change to the round trip. There's a test in the Orchard repo that hard codes essentially the pin verification key, and anything that causes a circuit change causes that test to be altered. So any changes that alter that are going to target a feature branch in the Orchard repo, so they won't be in master, which means that they can sort of be decoupled from any changes like the instance from parts API that you wanted Deirdre and stuff like that. So that we can sort of keep those two pieces separately, and then when we come to the point of actually finalizing the circuit, having reviewed and cleaned up all those any changes we want to bring in prior to the mainnet version, then we can merge that into Orchard just prior to cutting the final versions and rolling that through and rolling back testnet and so on.
Deirdre?
Any updates on the Halo 2 security proof and or the Orchard security proof? I think one of those, I think the Halo 2 one was closer to being done-ish than the other.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. We I don't know if I should say it, but I think like mid to late this month, I believe, is when Mary is going to be looking over the proof. And I'm not entirely, I think that's her schedule. I'll have to double check, but yeah, so I think that's currently, and we're set to make that schedule. All the hard parts of the proof and everything are done. It's just a matter of putting a couple things together and going through it, making sure it's okay, and then giving it to Mary. So
yeah,
I
Awesome.
don't know about the Orchard security proof though. I think that's mostly been Dara working on that, and Dara's on PTO until until we get back.
Yeah. So Dara was working on that one. And Mary's made a couple of passes over earlier versions of the proof and gave us some feedback in those cases, which we've incorporated. So this will be her, kind of, I guess, final pass over the proof. So.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. And our goal is to have like that buttoned down before, we would cut a release that set mainnet activation height anyway. It's kind of a sequencing thing for us. So that's what we're working toward. Tayor?
So I had a quick question and then a bigger question. So you said that you're going to be changing the circuit in a feature branch. What's the schedule for merging that into the main branch?
So what I'm thinking there is if we didn't have to worry about other dependencies like Zebra, then we would probably just merge straight into main branch, because Zcashd is just it's the current released version uses a pinned revision of the Orchard repo, and so there's no danger of it compiling with the latest version and having an incompatibility. And then at some point it would then flow through into Zcashd, and then there'd be a version of Zcashd that didn't work with current testnet. The way that I would normally sequence that, like the way that we've done that kind of thing in the past, not with the circuit change, but with, actually, no, we did do it for sapling technically. The sequencing normally there is that like just before we're cutting the release, we will make the PRs on Zcashd that bring in the updated and compatible version. And in that, I'm never quite sure as to whether we should make the bump on like consensus branch IDs in that PR or in the release PR. There's a semantic difference as to like, should there technically be a period of time in the Git repo history where you technically had the new rules, but you didn't have the new protocol version bump or whatever. And I mean, I don't really care about splitting it too finely there. As long as the delta is minimal, that basically satisfies what I'm happy with. So the strategy I would go for there is that we have, feature branch of Orchard that is with a new thing that we can just like build a bit. We might even make a feature branch of Zcashd that is using it perhaps, and that is testing on CI that way. I'd need to double check that Zcashd CI is currently set up to test that. But yeah, the sequencing there would be get the orchard release, decide on the mainnet activation height, merge the orchard feature branch into orchard master, denote that as the release. Whether or not we're able to cut it as an actual published version depends on other things like red DSA and whatever, but cut that as the mainnet orchard release, and then do the same thing effectively we did in 451, which is roll that into the Libra Zcash repo, then roll that into the Zcashd repo, and go through that dependency palaver.
So we'll need to be part of that process as well, because we'll need
Yeah.
to roll those same orchard changes into
Exactly.
Zebra and do our own version bumps and our own release. For us, rollbacks are quite simple, but we still need to remember to do them.
Right. Yeah. It would probably be, it should be possible to just, you can just test this rollback stuff early anyway by just pulling in the change branch and then checking that you're able to then just sync on with your own testnet miner. You should be able to fork testnet that way perfectly fine. It'd be nice if we could hook this up to testnet in the box as well, for just checking everything sort of happens fine there. But in practice, it's just with the sequencing happens right at the release point, and we just relying on review and CI and things for making sure that the changes themselves are sound. Yeah, and then the process then becomes that release would contain the new testnet activation height, which can be however far out we want from that release point, as well as the mainnet activation height for the point we decided on it there. And then testing just reactivates a period of time later once people have time to upgrade, and we go from there.
That all sounds good. It'll be particularly useful for us because it means that we can base our release on tag versions rather than Git commits, which has been a little confusing in the past.
No, that's absolutely where I want to get to.
Sure.
So we'll I'd already we'd already started discussing in because I'm just trying to think what remaining things we depend on for Git revisions. There's the incremental Merkle tree crate, which is just there's a PR that we haven't got merged into the main repo and got published out yet, but that can be done. And then there's, I think the only other one is the red DSA, red jub stack to sort out. And once those two are sorted out, I think pretty much everything that both our full nodes depend on can end up going into published versions.
All right, very good. Right. Any other questions? Sorry, any 5 testnet related or anything?
We were hoping to schedule a retrospective for the NU5 sort of planning and how it's all gone. Maybe in an Arborist call in November. I know the last time we talked about this, we wanted to make sure we scheduled it around the holidays. So is next Arborist call a good time, or did you want to do it after the mainnet activation has all been put in?
Two Arborist calls from now would be like December 2nd, right?
Yeah. Yes. The next one would be the 18th, and then December 2nd would be the following one. So we could shoot for the 2nd if that works for everyone. That sound okay?
Be fine for me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll do our normal little status, on how things are going, and then we'll reserve the bulk of the open discussion time on NU5 retro. Then we can also have a post mainnet activation retro for that last little part too. And hopefully it's very uneventful. So yeah. Exactly. How about that? Like double. So yeah. Deirdre.
That brings up a good point. So we're gonna have some zebras running on mainnet activation, and we had some zebras running and fully validating, or mostly fully validating for testnet, the one that just happened.
Right.
Does anyone have any opinions about how many is too few, too many? Should we deploy like 100 zebras and have them ready for, NU5 activation on mainnet? Is that a bad idea or a great idea? Is there, to be serious, are there any guidelines about this new activation on mainnet where we have a pretty distinct, fully validating node participating? Anything about that anyone has any opinions on?
I would say at a ballpark, I would say no more than a third of the network would be reasonable, just purely going off like, what's the tolerance for like malicious Byzantine nodes? A third is normally what gets quoted. So if we assume the worst, that ZebraD got everything wrong and is going to tear it down, then if we can keep it sort of 25 to 30% or less, then the network should be able to handle that. And if we assume the best, then that's an extra 25 or 30% of the network increase. It's like it increases the size of the network by like 50%. Mm-hmm. So like right now, my CEDA is seeing around about 173, 75-ish, around about that number of what it calls good nodes, i.e. long-term running nodes that it is advertising for connection. So obviously the number of actual nodes is higher than that and will just fluctuate as people turn their full nodes on and off and so on.
Right.
But yeah, so I would say like in the realm of 50 nodes would probably be fine, I would think. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
How much is that going to cost?
Well, I mean, if you just find people who are willing to run it, then
if you have to spin them up yourself.
So it would be really easy to scale our managed instance group from 2 in Iowa to 50 in Iowa with like a click right now. But I don't know if that's the most useful distribution of Zcash nodes around the world. Right. So that's some work that we've been meaning to do to make it much more evenly distributed around the global network as opposed to just sort of the restrictions of
and there's
Google
also
Cloud deployments.
Yeah, and there's also the aspect of like there's only so much benefit you get from one entity running a bunch of nodes. Like having one entity run like well-positioned nodes in different parts of the globe is I think a good idea. Right.
To give you an idea, we think that there are about 5 nodes being run by people who aren't maybe people who aren't in this call or people who aren't associated with the foundation, and then probably another 2 that the foundation is running explicitly, and 5 or 10 that foundation developers are running. So we're kind of at the 10%-ish mark right now, just to give you an idea.
Yeah. I am still noting though that like my CEDA does not see any ZebraD nodes as good. So yeah, we definitely need to chase that down before spinning up the number of nodes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we did a bit of work on that. We found a blockchain explorer that was reporting Zebra nodes. So we think that there is some issue in that, some undocumented rule in the network protocol that Zebra isn't implementing the same way that some CEDAs expect. And that's our current take on it, which is unfortunate because it makes it harder to track down. But yes, they're definitely appearing in some places, and Zebra itself can definitely see them. So we've got 2 different implementations that can, and a bunch that can't.
Yeah, the seeding implementation, which our one is just Bitcoin's one with some parameter changes, is literally just code that the Bitcoin devs extracted and like subset from the Bitcoin node. C++ nodes. So it is entirely possible that, yeah, the state machine that it implements is not actually quite the state machine that that Zebra expects to be talking to. Because I know you've got like a more rigorous state machine than I think was intended for the network protocol, shall we say.
Yeah, so maybe there is an open issue that we could fix where we just stop disconnecting from nodes when they don't meet our expectations, and that might fix this issue. So
yeah. I'm
that's
also
an option.
down, like, if we can figure out what it is, just patching the seeders to behave, you know, in a more specific way, because the seeders don't need to, you know, it doesn't really matter what protocol they implement. They just need to implement enough of the protocol that they can reach all of the nodes. And if it's just that, like, it just so happens that the way they got implemented, they end up being a visibly different network protocol when you are trying to treat them as a formal stack. The solution is just to, you know, reduce those, because it's not like, unlike the real nodes, we know all the seeder people. We can just get them to update it. It's fine.
All right. Okay. Anyone have anything else on NE5 or an open topic? Anything anyone would like to discuss that we didn't know about ahead of time? Seems like everyone's set. So we'll get the time back to Arborist calls from now. We'll do the NE5 retro after a quick little status update from ZBD and Zcashd on how things are going. So we'll focus on that. Any topics for the next Arborist call, you know, again, beyond the normal, here's how NE5 is looking, just let me know. We'll get those included and get pulled in. So. All right, everyone have a good rest of the day and a great upcoming weekend, and we'll catch up in Discord. Right.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye for now.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.